So let's get going. Welcome everybody to the meeting. We have a fair amount of stuff to cover, so let's get on the way. Stephen will start by talking about EVs in Japan. So you've been to Japan many times, and so he's going to give us an update on what's happening there. Then Mike had asked that we do an update on the OC Transpo e-bus situation. So I went and got some of the presentation we really have, and I'll show that. Then the other thing we wanted to do is to talk about what are the causes of climate change and how does that work. So the actual, I guess, physics and chemistry behind it. So we're not going to get into chemistry and physics that deep, but I'll go and explain what we know about what's causing climate change and how it works. Then we'll cover the news like usual, and then of course past and future events. So first thing before we go to you, Stephen, I just want to point out that for those who don't know, that the EV River pilot is now extended to Hyundai and Kia as well as Tesla. One of the things they told me today, so I think Kristen's on right now. One of the things they told me today is that there was a problem with the Teslas where they would drain the battery by interrogating the car too often. They've changed that to not interrogate the car, not to wake up the car so often, so it doesn't drain the battery over a period of weeks. Okay, so that's been fixed. So they're actively fixing bugs. Okay, so over to you.
Okay. Okay,
Yep,
good.
and we can see the screen
My
now
name
too.
is Steve Bailey, and I'm going to talk about electric vehicles in Japan. I've been to Japan about 12, 14 times. I haven't kept track. I'm married to a Japanese girl from Nagano where they had the Winter Olympics in '98. So my first time there was 2002, and I seen and back about 2011. I started seeing these families in the Mitsubishi IED on the roads around Tokyo and Nagano, and I thought, hey, this country is going to be right. But history has shown us otherwise. So what we assume doesn't always happen. So I'll get right into it. Just on the splash slide, you see the Nissan Sakura and its counterpart, the Mitsubishi EX. And they're basically the same car, and they're K car equivalents. I'll get a little bit more into that.
But they're electric.
They're electric. They're electric. They fall into that type of car. So here's the agenda. So it's a population of 125 million. It's a big population. It's the third biggest car market. It's mostly mountainous and forested. Like 90% of the people in Japan live in 10% of the land. Very, very big cities. Metropolitan Tokyo has a population of Canada. Biggest city in the world. It's just humongous. But they live in condos and apartment buildings. And the houses there don't have yards like we consider to have like a backyard and a front yard. They're very environmentally conscious. The folks there, and I'll just give you an example, a bit of a prop. This water bottle, when they go to recycle, they just don't throw it in the blue bin. They have one bin for the cap, one bin for the actual bottle, and then you take the label off and you throw it in another bin. So it's remarkable that they get people to do that, but the Japanese are a very rule-based society and they follow the rules by and large. And good luck trying to get Canadians to do that. Okay, so that's solar panels. You see a lot more solar panels in Japan, and I would argue the conditions there are not as good here as in Canada. You get those big cities in those valleys, and they have a lot of haze in the air, and they just don't have the blue skies like we do. They do have them, but not as much.
In terms of latitude, are they about the same as us?
They're about the same as us, yeah. And it goes from like northeast to southwest, like in a diagonal from Hokkaido up near Russia down to Okinawa, which is basically their Florida, tropical area. So that's a big part, and this was the case in 2010, 11. A lot of houses have solar panels. Fukushima, March 2011. The Japanese freaked out, understandably so. To this day, people do not go and live and work right around that nuclear plant. That was 13 years ago, so they're not big on nuclear. So I'll just go back one. So it was on the surface, it was right for electric vehicles. So Elon Musk, if you read his book, he thought like, hey, Japan's gonna be a natural market. They've got, they're environmentally conscious. They don't have a lot of natural resources. So they came out around 2011. I started seeing these Nissan Leafs and the Mitsubishi IMEV. And you can see there, one on the left, that's a Mitsubishi. And they had cab stands in Tokyo Station in 2011 where they had this little Mitsubishi IEV and Nissan. That was 2011. And that's a K truck. That's my little boy there. He's about 8 or 9 in the picture. And that's what I mean by a K truck. Most Japanese would never go out and buy an F-150. I've never seen an F-150 in Japan, or a Dodge Ram, or a GMC Sierra. They buy these little K trucks, and that's how the farmers, gather up the crops and do the work around the farm. So what are the issues? Well, I know, Raymond, we talked about this before, hydrogen. Toyota and the Japanese government have put a multi-billion-dollar bet in hydrogen. And I'll get more into that, what's going on there. It's just, we could talk all day. The cultural nuances. Japan, they're very proud of Toyota, Honda, Nissan, Mitsubishi. I've been there, and all those times I've been in Japan, I've never seen a Korean-made car or a Chinese-made car. Not one. I'm sure they're there, but I've never seen one. And if you're going to buy an import, you buy a Mercedes, a BMW, and Audi because of the status. You don't go buy a Ford Mustang or a Lincoln Continental or a Cadillac. Never seen one. And then the other issue is Tesla came in and they put out the S and the X. And I think the next slide is like a shot of an elevator. There's a Toyota Mirai. Okay, I don't know. I thought I had a shot here of the elevator.
There is one in there.
Okay. Japanese car parts. They have elevators that bring the cars up and down. And the Model X and the S are too heavy and too long to go on those elevators. So they're inconvenient. And people in Japan, they don't like that. And the streets are very narrow. The parking spots in any grocery store are smaller than ours. It's not like Costco. They have these big parking spots. They're narrow and congested. Where are we here? Okay, there's the Toyota Mirai. They're not doing well. They don't sell a lot, believe me. So there it is, less than a half a point for the U.S. market. The Europeans, 4.4, mainly Mercedes, Audi, and BMW. There it is right there. You see the size of those car elevators? The yellow plate is a K car. So it gives you a good sense about the size of cars there. And I'll just tell you a little story about the cultural issues. Elon Musk, basically people go on a website and you order a car. My father-in-law, he's an executive with a construction company, and every 2 years, the local Toyota salesman would call him up and say, Mr. Miyashita, it's time for your new 2008 Toyota Crown. We have a great black one in stock, and we'll bring it to your house, or we'll bring it to wherever you want to take a drive. So every 2 years, that salesman, the same salesman over 20 years, would come out and sell him a black Toyota Crown. And that's the way they do it. It's a personal relationship. It's not like when you go down to your local Ford dealer or your local Volkswagen dealer, and you're dealing with a stranger. You're dealing with somebody you know and trust, and they'll go out of their way. So going here to 2024, so Tesla did do well in the first 10 years they were in Japan. So the Nissan Sakura doing well. Tesla's come out with the Y and the 3 since then, and they're starting to sell, so it's starting to pick up. I think I looked in the state of play. I think they sold like 2,800 cars in the first 6 months of 2024. And that's sort of like, because Tesla does not publish their sales data, but somebody went in and figured it out. Toyota and the Japanese government continue to bet on hydrogen. Yeah. And I think I looked into it, and in 2021, they sold something like 2,000. 2022, something like 1,000. And last year, they sold 422 hydrogen cars in all of Japan. 422 cars.
And they're trying hard to push them.
Oh, they're just, they lose so much money. BYD, you know, they have big plans right now. They have 55 dealerships in Japan. They're aiming for 90 by the end of 2024. However, I think that what I saw, the stats, it's in the other version, they sold 1,084 BYD cars in the first 6 months of 2024. They probably sell that in a week in the UK. So they're not doing well, and that goes back. Each individual market is unique, and I think a lot of people like Elon Musk didn't understand those cultural differences and the pride the Japanese people have in their homemade cars. And that's the Tesla Supercharger network as of June. You can see you can pretty well go anywhere in Japan in the Tesla network, cluster around Osaka and Tokyo. The growth has been like it's like in around 2014, chargers start to really be like brought up in Japan, but the growth hasn't been spectacular since about 2017. It's pretty well flat, and something happened that it happened before, like EVs before the time. These are charging stations that have closed in Japan, and you see during COVID and just right after, a lot of charging sites were closed down. People would put them in 2014. No one would ever come. They're taking up a parking spot, and parking spots are like gold in Japan. You have to, when you buy a car in Japan, you have to prove you have a place to park it. So that's something we never have to worry about here. So, however, I know the Japanese government have committed to 300,000 charging sites by 2030. So there are incentives. There's all sorts of I've looked into. I won't get into all what they have. Like the Japanese government wants to make a big push for EVs, and they're trying. And Toyota is saying they're going to make a lot more of them. We'll see how that goes. And the other companies, Nissan seems to be the lead, Mitsubishi as well. So they have a lot of, because of all the incentives out there, a lot of private companies in the charging sphere are jumping in, and we'll see what happens. It's 2024, 2030. It's only 5.5 years out.
But your first point there is that new residential buildings will have to have chargers.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's going to be a big game changer. And then you can see, like, here's the slide. You can see Canada, Japan, I threw in Thailand, the UK. Japan is not doing well compared to a country like Thailand. Thailand is the EV vehicle sales have exploded there. BYD has just opened up a plant there, 150,000 vehicles production annually. That's a lot more EVs than sold in Japan. So they have a lot of issues there in Japan, and hopefully they can get over it. I think if the Japanese government and Toyota is like 1/3 of the Japanese car market, they can really make a difference. So that's basically it. And you can see why we've had our own issues in here in Canada. Some had already mentioned about Oakville. So we'll see what happens in Canada, where things don't always go the way we want it. They certainly didn't go the way that Elon Musk thought it would go in Japan in 2011.
Actually, last year's sales in Canada were 10.8%.
Okay.
That was the year before, probably.
Okay, maybe. Okay.
Yep.
And that was the EV was BYD and the Dolphin. It's apparently a great car for a very reasonable price. And they didn't have the 100% tariff they announced today, they would sell like hotcakes in Canada. I'm sure of it.
$20,000 four-door hatchback.
Yeah.
With long range.
Yeah, that would sell like hotcakes.
It's selling in Australia like hotcakes.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're ever going to bring it here with that 100% tariff, but they're apparently big in Thailand.
Well, it would make it a $40,000 car here, which is not what that is.
So they're talking about building a plant in Mexico. If they do
Yeah,
that, then they'd
that's
be
true.
Yeah, but the Americans are pushing on the Mexican government to not let them build a plant, so we'll see.
I think what should happen is they should build a plant here, but anyways.
Yeah. Okay, that concludes. Any questions out there from the audience at home?
I thought you had something else you want to mention that you added after.
No, it's in the state of play. I
Okay.
talked about that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yep. There we go.
Can I ask a question? Very, not a too detailed question. Just simply, You mentioned hydrogen and it's not being taken on so much. Is it because it's not mature technology yet, or is it because of other reasons?
It's a whole bunch of things there.
Yeah, so we've talked about hydrogen a lot in the past and the
We can
problem.
have it at the round table, but it's mostly a physics problem.
Yeah,
Hydrogen
it's,
is not-
it's much less efficient and because it's less efficient, it makes it more expensive. So it doesn't make sense. So would it made sense 20 years ago when you didn't have batteries that were good enough to have long range cars, but today it's not a problem, right? So,
There's too many like technical.
I
yeah,
know
there's a whole bunch of, we could talk about it for a long time, so.
there's a lot of people still believe in that, but
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
entitled
but,
to their opinion.
yes,
Well, the oil industry is pushing the idea, but it's.
yeah, so the oil industry are the ones that are pushing hydrogen, okay, because
It's a.
most hydrogen is made with methane, which is natural gas, right? So it's a market for the natural gas. That's why they're pushing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about OC Transpo a bit. So you guys obviously, or most of you at least are aware that we've worked a lot with OC Transpo to get electric buses on the roads, right? So let's talk about the update that they did. So they did an update back in March is the last update they did. And this is where, I don't know why it says continued there, because that's what they had.
Probably their
Hey.
slide.
Sorry?
It's their slide, right?
Yeah, it's their slide. I've got a chart that shows these numbers a different way here, but essentially what they've done is in March, they had signed a contract with New Flyer Industries for 51 buses. And they were negotiating at that time, and I believe they've signed an agreement to get 51 more from Nova.
Yeah,
Okay?
in July they signed it.
In July they signed it? Okay, so what does that mean? That means in terms of delivery schedule, so 26 buses here. There's 4 that would be Nova Bus, and the rest would be New Flyer Industries, and they have 4 right now, so they'll have 30 by the end of the year, okay? And I thought that they would have a whole other bunch in Q1 of 2025, but that slipped again, so actually it's gonna be at the end of the year, they're gonna have a mix of the balance of the Nova buses and a bunch of New Flyers by the end of next year. And then as you can see, in 2026, they're buying another bunch of 40-foot buses, 92 of them. And those haven't been contracted as far as I know yet. And then after that, they're gonna be buying 60-foot buses. So they're gonna start replacing the aging 60-foot buses. So by the end of all this, it's this 348 is what's in here, plus the 4 they have. So at the end of 2027, they should have 352 buses, okay, electric buses, which is be somewhere around half the fleet where they are now. I'm not sure if they're gonna reduce the fleet after stage 2, but given the.
They want to reduce the fleet after stage 2, but as Matt has told us many times, it'll actually require more buses.
Yeah, but you know, the mayor and the budget
Yeah.
is a bit of an obstacle.
Yeah.
So just to talk a bit about where they're gonna put these buses, and actually, I'm a bit perplexed about what they're doing because they're putting all the electric buses at their facility on Saint Laurent. Okay, which I thought, especially if they're building a new building, it'd be an opportunity to build one in East End or the West End, closer to where people actually are, and where they'll need buses to bring people to the LRT. But anyways, they decided to build you see the new building on the left-hand side there, so that should be finished in 2026. And if I remember correctly, what's the order here? I think the North Garage is where they're doing work right now, where they had the pilot buses, right? That's where we visited, I'm pretty sure.
No, it's the south. We visited
The south one?
garage where they had the buses already.
South Garage, okay. So anyways, they're upgrading both of those to be able to charge e-buses. At the top here, they're adding a maintenance bay for high voltage buses, so electric buses, right? So and they're doing that over the next couple of years. Now they're doing electrical work. I don't think I have it here. Yeah, I don't have it here, but they're doing a whole bunch of electrical work. You see, you can imagine that charging these buses is going to take a lot of power, right? So they're adding a new substation. And they're doing a bunch of other things that are quite expensive and timely to do, right? So for those of you who don't know, if you're trying to order, depends on the transformer, but some of the equipment takes a long time to get. There's a really long lead time. So, over the next couple of years, they'll have all of these facilities in place.
Just a quick question, I'm just trying to orient that,
That's Saint Laurent.
that's Saint Laurent.
Saint is right there,
Okay,
yeah.
And where's that big garage that you just built for
LRT,
LRTs?
Oh, it's
it's elsewhere.
top left of the picture.
Top left, okay.
Yeah, it's not that one though. It's somewhere
No,
else.
it's
Yeah.
top left. that.
Top lane, yeah, that way, okay, you're right,
Yeah.
yeah, it's somewhere else off of
Yeah.
the screen, so. That's a big facility also, very big facility, and actually
I drive by there all the time.
they've built a facility, or they are building another facility in the West End. Actually on the Greenbelt land.
Yeah, it's right beside the Queensway.
Yeah, anyways, it's on Greenbelt land and they're building it there. And it should be done.
It's
whenever they
finished,
open.
it's finished now. I drive by there, look.
They,
The barn-
they just have to put up the cat hearing.
The barn's been built for 2 years now.
Yeah, but it didn't look finished to me, but maybe it is. So anyways, but they've been building it for a long time.
Yeah,
And,
you have to look to buy it.
and that's part of the facilities for stage 2, right? So, stage 2 will, end at Moody, right?
Yep.
So it doesn't go to Canada quite yet. So that's what it looks like. Is there any questions from anybody or anybody, online? About that? Pretty straightforward. I don't know if there's. No?
Did they say anything about parking, I guess, out for the Moody stuff?
They didn't mention anything that I saw anyways.
No park and ride arranged at the Moody station? That's too bad.
No, they haven't, no, it's meant to feed D&D basically. There's a big bus terminus there.
Yeah, but the idea is stage 3 would extend that further out.
Well, stage 3 is gonna go to Canada,
Yeah.
but Moody is gonna be, where you switch onto your other transitway bus to go to wherever you're going. Cause Moody's in the middle of the greenbelt, so it's kind of,
Yeah,
there's nothing.
But they're gonna extend from Moody to Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why the MSF is where it is, because they've got tracks to through run to Canada one day.
So I think, Alan, I think what they're doing is, they're doing the same thing as what they did with
Pennies.
Pennies, where in my opinion, they made a mistake because they built a station that would be a station somewhere along the line, while it was the end station for years and it was under capacity, undersized for the
Yeah.
purpose it's serving right now, right? So I think they're making the same mistake at Moody. And I guess your point is there should be park and ride there to make it more usable for people in the West, right?
Well, the park and ride is in Canada and they'll just have to take a bus to the Moody.
Yeah,
Yeah,
basically you park and ride at Terry Fox and you just hop on a bus and it's one stop.
Well, there's one at Eagleson too, but yeah.
Oh, Eagles to go 2 stops.
it's a bit of a pain to do that, but anyways, that's what it is right now.
Our system is designed for people with cars to drive to the bus.
Yeah. Anyways, any other questions on OC Transpo? No? Other questions? Yeah, cool. I'm hoping that the mayor doesn't do anything to correct these plans here.
Well, you will.
Not 100% convinced that he won't, but anyways. As many of you know, they're way behind schedule, and hopefully they won't get further behind schedule.
Although Amilcar did say that, two of the councilors asked at the last meeting if they would have the option to buy diesel buses as a stopgap. And Amilcar was basically like, the bus companies won't sell us diesel buses anymore.
Everybody's buying electric,
So,
so
That's a good thing.
that's a really good thing. Now, the other thing that happened is that when they were doing the stuff way back before they bought the first buses, they committed to reviewing the type of bus they're gonna buy after a certain amount of time. I think it's a big waste of time. We told them back then it was a waste of time for them to assess which buses to buy. We told them the electric ones were the ones to buy. It was clear there, and that hasn't changed. So one of the things I want to do is go and talk to them and try to see if we could get them to just don't waste your time, just spend your time on something else, right? Because they hired a consulting company and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to tell them essentially nothing new, right? So the only new piece of information that was in there, the only one that I could recall is a little factoid. The hydrogen buses from New Flyer Industries are actually heavier than the battery electric buses from New Flyer Industries. That's the only thing that I could remember that was new in there. So not very much to get in there. Anyway, so let's talk about climate change.
One
So
question.
yes.
So I understand that BYD is also making buses in Canada.
Yes.
Yes.
So they'll be one of the contenders for these contracts.
They're not buying them from BYD.
They were part of the competition, but were ruled out because Toronto They ran the competition and they were not satisfied with BYD's.
Yeah, so the quality of the buses, so Toronto bought buses from New Flyer, from Nova and from BYD.
Yeah,
They were supposed to buy from Proterra, but I think they never got them.
yeah,
Proterra went bankrupt, so.
yeah. So that's
But
what
the quality they got wasn't there, so they decided to not, go with
Yeah.
BYD.
we just attached ourselves to the Toronto team.
Yes, yeah.
Whatever they ordered.
So in our case, as long as it's electric, we don't,
We don't care.
just buy electric and I don't care which one it is, yeah. So.
Yeah, just curious, and Montreal is buying BYD. The reason I'm asking is also the entry point for BYD as a potential factory here and how that may evolve into.
I mean, they have a factory in
Peterborough. I think
Peterborough.
it's- Somewhere around.
But yeah, I mean, Montreal's buying Nova buses as well and New Flyer.
Yeah, see, Nova Bus is based out of Quebec near Montreal, so they get preferred.
Yeah, so they basically schedule.
And there was a huge procurement done of over 1,000 electric buses not too long ago. They were all Nova Bus. So because they're buying local, right? So. Okay, any other questions about Transpo? No? Okay, cool. We could talk about it in the roundtable if you wish to also. So let's talk about climate change a bit. And like I was saying, Lawrence actually suggested we should go over what are the causes of climate change more from a scientific and technical point of view. Why is this important? Well, if you look at this is a graph that shows the average daily temperature on the planet for over the last 60, 70 years since 1940. And you can see the orange line, that's last year. And you see especially the second part of the year, records almost every day, okay? And the red line is the start of this year, records for a lot of the time, but very, very high average temperatures, okay? And it's not just El Nino, okay? There's been El Ninos elsewhere. You know, we get those every, I don't remember what the cycle is. I think it's every 5 or 6 years or something. So we had a lot of them before and it doesn't explain it, right? So, so let's go into it a bit. One thing to note, and this is something that I think that people that are less scientifically inclined don't really understand. So all of this stuff, all of the climate change stuff, so the greenhouse gases and all that, it's all about balance, chemical balance and energy balance. Okay, so if you take a glass of water or a glass of ice cubes, you put them in the freezer, they'll get colder. You put them out in the counter, they will melt, right? If you put that the melted water back in the fridge, it's going to freeze, right? But it's going to take some time. So when you put the ice cubes on the counter, it'll take whatever, maybe half an hour, whatever it is, for the temperature to equalize, right? So that's where balance is. So you change the balance by putting ice cubes out in the open, and thermodynamics essentially causes the balance to be restored. Okay, so the heat from the environment will transfer to the ice cubes, make it melt and warm up the water until the temperature in the room is the same as the temperature of the water. Okay, now that's important because every single thing that touches to the physics and chemistry of climate change is a question of balance. Okay. One quick example, so lots of CO2, right? Greenhouse gas, the biggest greenhouse gas is CO2. Well, the CO2 gets absorbed by water, okay? Now, it gets absorbed by water, and if you know a bit of chemistry, you'll know that if the water is hotter, it cannot absorb as much CO2, okay? The other thing is that it takes some time for the ocean to absorb that CO2, and if you look at the way the ocean works, I guess, surface water is different from deep water. So a lot of the surface water's got lots of CO2 in it, but there's a lot of deep water that doesn't, right? It's going to take thousands of years for some of the CO2 to circulate into the some of the deeper water, okay? But bottom line here is it's a question of balance. If we stop emitting all greenhouse gases today, temperatures will probably keep on rising for another few decades before they start declining, okay? Because these take a long time to adjust. So, so the basic stuff about climate change has to do with the greenhouse effect, right? So if you look at Venus and Earth, and you look at Earth, we have a relatively small atmosphere, relatively thin atmosphere with not very much CO2. If you look at Venus, they have a much thicker atmosphere, okay? And it's mostly CO2, so very strong greenhouse gas. So what's the impact there? Well, it means the average temperature on Earth is 15 degrees Celsius, but on Venus, it's 457 degrees Celsius, okay, 457. A lot hotter, right? So maybe you'll say, well, Raymond, it's closer to the sun, so yeah, it's going to be hotter, right? But if you look at Mercury, it's got an atmosphere thinner than what the Earth has, and it's cooler than Venus, even though it's much, much closer to the sun, okay? So this is one of the reasons we know about this greenhouse effect, because we see it elsewhere. It's not just on our planet we see it, okay? So how does that work? Well, the sun radiates energy to the planet in all sorts of wavelengths, okay? And that, a lot of it gets absorbed by the Earth in various ways. And then what happens is, so most of it is absorbed and warms it, right? And then some of it is rejected back as infrared, okay? So you get different wavelengths coming in, you get infrared going out. So where CO2 is important is CO2 will reflect the infrared, okay? So what happens is some of it is reflected, and if we increase the amount of CO2 you're putting in the atmosphere, we're blocking more of it. So the balance goes towards more heat on the planet. Okay, so that's how the thing gets out of balance, and the nature makes it balance out through thermodynamics and processes of that sort. Okay, makes sense? That's the basics of it. Okay. So if you look at the size of the problem, so right now we're spewing somewhere around 162 million tons of greenhouse gases every single day. Okay, that's a lot. Every single day we're doing that. Okay, that's a lot of stuff we're putting in the atmosphere. And this is no, this is not the proof that the Earth is flat, Mike. Okay?
I never.
You see the curve. Yeah, you do see a bit of the curve, but the point here is it's a very small arc. And you see the blue, that's the atmosphere. It's very, very thin. Okay, if you had a globe, you know, a size globe like we had in the past, I guess we don't do that anymore. But anyways, the atmosphere would be about the thickness of a piece of paper. It's very, very thin. Okay, but we're putting humongous amounts of stuff in that very thin layer, right? So it's having a big impact. So what are the sources of greenhouse gases? There's a whole bunch of them. Man-made ones, right? There's some that are agriculture is a big one, right? So, but essentially most of it is burning of fossil fuels. Okay. So if you look at the largest source of global warming is burning of fossil fuels. We'll talk about the different gases, the impact they have later. But this here is a chart that shows from 1850 or so how much we've added to the atmosphere every single year. So you see a small dip in 2020. That's because of the pandemic. But we have not yet, as far as I know, peaked our emissions. So we keep on adding more CO2 to the atmosphere. So the concentration of CO2 keeps increasing. So the greenhouse effect is getting even more severe. Okay. So another gas that's important is methane. And actually, this one has increased a lot more. It went from about 0.8 or so to almost 1.9. That's parts per million. And most of you probably know that methane is actually a much stronger greenhouse gas. Now, why do we say over 20 years that it's 82 times more potent? It's because what happens in the atmosphere is methane reacts with other stuff in the atmosphere and gets degraded into mostly CO2. So it stays as a greenhouse gas, but it's CO2, but it stays for a while. I believe the half-life for methane is about 12 years in the atmosphere, something of the sort. So it does degrade over time, but we're adding a lot to the atmosphere.
Methane is codenamed natural gas.
Yeah. Well, it's a portion of natural gas.
When you say methane, people think cow farts, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, whatever. But that's your natural gas.
Yes. So that's one thing. That's a good point to note there is that methane in particular, there are many sources of methane. So cow farts, actually it's car burps that are the bigger problem.
Whatever.
About 80% is burps, about 20% is farts.
I love that you know that statistic.
I read too much stuff there. So So one of the other big sources of methane is rice cultivation. Okay, so rice paddies, they're underwater most of the time, and there's decay that's happening. It's anaerobic decay, so it produces methane. Okay, so normal decay up in the air will produce CO2, but anaerobic decay will produce methane. Okay, so there's a lot coming from there. There's methane from a bunch of other sources, including gas wells that leak methane.
And all the tankless water heaters that burp every time you turn on the hot water.
Yeah, so there's a lot of sources. Also, waste heaps. So landfills are a big source of methane. There's a bunch of range.
Use your green bin,
Yeah,
so you don't have the anaerobic decay you have in the aerobic.
yeah. The composting is supposed to be aerobic. Yeah, so it
Right.
should be a lot better than the landfill. But some landfills, like the one in Trail Road, they actually capture the methane and they do some stuff with it, but I'm not sure exactly what they do with it. I think they use it to heat their buildings and all that in the winter. So what does that mean from all these greenhouse gases? What does it do to the average temperature? Well, you can see here from 1880 to more or less today, the temperature has gone up. Average temperature has gone up dramatically, right? So you look at this and you compare it to the two graphs I just showed. It's clear that there's a cause and effect, right? It's not just correlation; it's a cause and effect, right? Now. Let's go. So anyways, I took a bunch of slides from a bunch of presentations and I put them together. Anyways, this is the North Pole. And one of the things you probably know is that the ice cover has actually reduced because the air is warmer. The ice melts more. And what happens is because there's less ice to reflect energy back into space, the light and the energy from the light is absorbed by the ocean. And it's getting warmer and warmer. Okay, so because there's less ice, the water absorbs more heat, which means that the ice has more trouble forming, which means there's more heat. So it's a vicious cycle where we believe that by sometime around probably possibly 2030, there'll be no ice in the north in the summer.
6 years away.
6 years away, yes. Okay, it could be as early as that. If it's not that, it's maximum of about 20 years.
We're worried about the canal not freezing.
Well, yeah. So it's a big problem, right? So here, so what this illustrates is that when you look at the planet as overall, there's a lot more energy that comes to the equator, okay, to the middle of the planet, because that's where there's more sun hitting, okay? So what happens though is that because of thermodynamics and all that, the heat from the equator or lower latitudes is transferred to higher latitudes. Okay, that happens through a bunch of natural cycles, and so ocean currents and that kind of stuff. But what we're seeing is for 1 degree of heating at the equator, okay, we're getting 4 degrees at the pole. So there's a lot more heating happening at the pole. Maybe we should turn the light on to. In the dark for the other ones here. So there's a lot more heating proportionally happening at the pole, okay? So that makes a difference in a lot of different ways. And I'm not going to cover everything about climate change here, but where this becomes important, and I think it's on the next slide, is with, the polar vortex. So the polar vortex, what causes it is that the air in the north is colder. So because it's colder, it shrinks, okay? So what happens is you have air that shrinks there and air that's not shrinked here, so it causes a wind, essentially a displacement of the atmosphere to the pole. And that's what causes a polar vortex, which causes the jet stream.
Also, the earth is rotating.
That's part of it, yes, but the why is it happening there? It's because of the difference in temperature. Now, because it's the difference in temperature is becoming less, the polar vortex is becoming weaker. Okay, why is that important? Well, it also jet stream is getting weaker. Okay, so what does that do to the jet stream? Well, it means the jet stream, instead of being fairly regular and fast, it becomes wavy, okay? And here, this is an example of what, actually, I think I have it on the other screen. So this is the real jet stream. in February 2021. I don't know if you guys remember what happened in February 2021.
It's cold as hell.
You'll see, it was cold in Texas.
Yeah.
Okay, so what it did is it pulled cold air way down. And because it's slow and wavy, it tends to keep the cold air in one location for a long time. The same thing with warming. Okay, so same thing with dry versus wet. It keeps weather systems localized much more. Okay, so what happened in 2021, you probably remember Dallas had 1 degree Fahrenheit.
They blamed it on the windmills.
And blamed the wheels on it, yeah. So they actually had many people die because of that. Okay, so you know, there's people in the U.S. that they would have said. You probably saw one of the senators brought a snowball into Congress and said, "Hey, I've got a snowball here. That means that this global warming thing is crap, right?" Well, no. Global warming is causing climate change, which causes stuff like this to happen. Okay, so this is. It's always a question of probabilities. We can't say it's 100% because of climate change, but we could be pretty sure it's probably in a 99% chance that this cold here was caused directly by climate change.
Oh, that's Fahrenheit.
That's Fahrenheit. That would be gold for us. Okay, because it's Fahrenheit. Okay. So other thing that's happened is this was in the middle of winter, 2018. The temperature was 28 degrees Celsius above normal. It wasn't 28 degrees Celsius, but it was 28 degrees Celsius above normal. And this is a picture of the North Pole. It's not the same time. And you see how much water there is, okay? 100 years ago, there was no water to be seen. It was all ice, okay? So it's changing and changing very fast up north. So what does this show again? Oh yeah, okay. One thing to note is 93% of the heat, the extra heat that's being trapped is going into the ocean, okay? That's a lot of heat. One of the impacts here is that water, when it gets hotter, it expands, right? So about 80%, I believe it is, of the increase in sea level is caused by the water that got warmer, okay? There's also melting glaciers and ice caps and all that, but they contribute at this point a smaller percentage, okay? So if you look at the ocean temperatures, again, looks like the air temperatures, right? You probably saw today a news bit where they were talking about the temperature in the Persian Gulf. And the water is at like 36 degrees Celsius. It's hot tub, eh? It's hot tub. It's about the same temperature as your body, right? It wouldn't be refreshing at all. So it's very, very hot, right? And this is unusual. And what's happening is that with hurricanes, you probably heard that research has shown, there's been a lot of hurricane research over the last 30, 40 years. And research has shown that when a hurricane goes over a warmer patch of water, it intensifies. Okay, so the warmer the water is, the more it will intensify. Okay, we don't know, by the way, if we're going to have more or less hurricanes. There's some debate there. Some people are saying more, some people are saying less. But what they all agree on is hurricanes are becoming more intense. Okay, not just wind. So the current categories of hurricanes only talk about wind. What's becoming a bigger problem is the what do you call that, storm surge, and the rain that's falling during these hurricanes. Okay, so they intensify much more rapidly, and I could show you stuff on that, but wanted to limit the presentation. So, and also warmer air holds more moisture, so there's more rain that will fall, right? So so what we're seeing is hurricanes. So you might have seen in Houston, they had some big hurricanes / tropical storms and got like 30 inches of rain. Like imagine 30 inches of rain. It's just crazy, right? So storm surges are increasing also because of sea level rise, and the wavier jet stream keeps these things in place longer. So not only is there more overall rain falling, because it's stayed in one place, there's more rain at that one location. So it causes lots of floods,
We're
right?
also talking about creating a new category, category 6.
Yeah. They're talking about changing it, including waterfall too and all that to account for all that. So there's a lot of discussion on it. So another thing to note is that as the temperatures increase, there's more moisture that evaporates into the air. Okay, so, and I think I have a number here. Yeah, so warmer air could hold a lot more water vapor. So for every additional degree Celsius of increase, we get 7% more water. Okay, that's a lot. Now, water is interesting because if it's in the form of a cloud, it reflects energy out into space. So that portion of it cools the earth. However, water is actually the biggest greenhouse gas. We don't normally talk about it, is actually water vapor. We don't talk about it because it doesn't vary that much, aside from the 7% CO2 and methane and other stuff varies a lot more. But it's a strong greenhouse gas. So because there's more water, we get more heat that's kept, but the clouds counterbalance that to some degree. Okay. So they're saying we're already 5% more than 30 years ago. This is data that's 2 or 3 years old, by the way. So the downpours get bigger. You may have seen some images like that. And this is in 2017 here in Ottawa. It's one of my crappy pictures, but this is the Gatineau side when you had the latest floods, right? And this was the same year or later. Sorry?
Oh, that's, okay.
That's on bank near.
I know that's Billings Bridge, but
Right
are you
across.
sure that's not last year?
No. It's 20. It may have happened again.
Oh, that building definitely flooded again.
Yeah, it could have happened again, but this was the first time this flooded ever like this. Never flooded like that before. That's because of lots of localized heavy rain in one place, right?
It also flooded last year like that.
Like that too?
Yeah, that was the day my basement flooded.
Okay. Anyways, so the extra heat that evaporates the water, what it does too is it actually dries soil also. Okay, so you may have seen, I don't have the pictures here, but in the Amazon, there's actually patches that are dry. Okay, the Amazon naturally was a very wet environment, created its own climate and all that, but because there's less trees and because it's warmer, the land dries up. Okay, so that causes all sorts of other problems, right? Antarctica. Okay, so Antarctica, what I want to say here is that we're losing a lot of ice from Antarctica, also from Greenland. So Greenland and Antarctica account for most of the ice that's available on the planet, right? And you can see the amount of ice lost per year over time. It's increasing quite a bit, okay? And lots of studies being done on this because these are interesting calculations to figure this out. And there's some cases where you've heard of the Doomsday Glacier, probably. You've heard of it, right? So this is a glacier in Antarctica. If it lets go, it's probably going to cause a significant rise in ocean levels in a very, very short amount of time. We're talking feet or meters in a very short amount of time. So if you look at the impact of that, so the top 10 cities from a population perspective that are at risk, most of them are, less wealthy cities here, okay? Shanghai is pretty wealthy now, but Miami's good, okay? But Miami is down the list, right? All the other ones are all in the east. I mean, some of them are very poor cities, right? If you look at from a dollar perspective of assets at risk, Miami is up there. You've probably seen pictures of Miami and all the condos that are right by the water side, right? The soil in Miami is very porous, so they couldn't even build a wall to keep the water out of Miami, because if they build a wall, the water's just gonna go underneath, so it's not gonna do anything. Okay, so Miami is gonna be interesting, eh?
It's screwed.
It is, and actually, Mark goes there, so, yeah.
Oh, that's fine.
So Miami is one of the cities that's most at risk there, but New York is number 3 here, okay? New York, you remember there were floods during a few hurricanes and tropical storms, Sandy in particular, right? And that's likely to happen much more frequently in the future. Tropical diseases, so warming climate actually is helping disease to spread to colder climes. So West Nile virus, we've heard about that over the last 5, 10, maybe 15 years here in Canada. Used to not be a thing. It comes from the West Nile. That's why it's called that. But with warmer temperatures, the mosquitoes that harbor it, or the ticks or whatever it is that harbor it, are able to survive in colder climates like we have here. So there's a bunch of other diseases that are expanding from mostly tropical bases to colder climates. Okay, so there's a lot of impacts on this. We'll go through this. It's a post slide. But this lists some of the issues. Okay, I didn't talk about ocean acidification, which is a big problem, right? And climate refugees. That's another big problem. So Syria, really, what happened in Syria is all caused by climate. They had about a 7-year drought before the civil war started. And the civil war was more than likely, well, actually, almost certainly, a result of that drought that caused people who couldn't grow food anymore to go to the city to try to get work and food, right? And it destabilized the country, caused a war, and caused migration. So anyways, lots of different impacts. So it's really the number one threat to the global economy. And actually, the U.S. Department of Defense, they're saying it's a number one threat for security, okay, because of the impact in infrastructure and climate refugees and those kinds of things. Okay. So, and who's responsible for that? For the vast majority, it's the fossil fuel industry. No big surprise there, right, Mike? So anyways,
Friggin' Enbridge.
yeah, so if you want to look at the different gases that are out there and their contribution, here it shows some of the gases, and carbon dioxide has the biggest contribution. Methane is the next one. So methane is quite important, but not as important as CO2. There's nitrous oxide that comes mostly from reactions with fertilizer in the soil and also from engines. And there's CFCs and a few others, right? So there's a number of different gases that contribute. Now, if you look at this slide, which is a bit more interesting, what it shows is there are some cases, so aerosols in particular, where more aerosols blocks sunshine, okay? So the fact that things have been warm in the last couple of years, climate scientists are saying this probably in large part due to the fact that we cleaned up the fuel that we use in ships, okay? And that has reduced the amount of aerosols in the air. So that's reduced the amount of reflecting of light by the aerosols, okay? So by trying to remove stuff that's bad for our health, we're making the climate change problem a bit worse, okay? But there's a bunch of good contributions, some, like I talked about water, there's positives and negatives, right? But on the whole, this is the net here, we are adding lots of heat to the atmosphere, right? So you may have heard of the Milankovitch cycles, right? If people tell you that, oh, it's all the cycles that cause this stuff, well, there's something called the Milankovitch cycles. There's 3 of them, at least 3 main ones. And what they do is they change the rotation of the Earth over time. And what they do is they could cause a variation of up to 25% in the mid latitudes of how much solar radiation happens, okay? So it does have an impact on the amount of energy that hits the Earth and how much of it is absorbed and all that, right? So it's enough to cause the ice ages. So the leading theory right now, actually, it's really, I think, quite proven out, is that it's those cycles that cause the ice ages. Okay? But it's not enough to explain what we see today. And if you remember one of the graphs I showed earlier, really, we should be heading into a mild ice age at this point, but the temperatures are increasing dramatically still, okay? Okay, what's the proof? Just a few other things. So when you look at things like gravity, we actually don't know what causes gravity, okay? If anybody can explain that, you will be a candidate for Nobel Prize. But we can model it very accurately, right? We could, orbital mechanics and all that are modeled very, very accurately. We could tell when there's going to be an eclipse years in advance, exactly where, for exactly how long, right? We could calculate very accurately, but we don't really know what causes it, okay? The weather and climate, it's the opposite. There's so many contributing factors, and it's hard to work out the net of all these things. Like I said before, some things will make the problem worse, some things will make the problem better, depending on what they are. So it's a very, very complex system, right? So we do know that the average temperature has been increasing. We saw some graphs there. One thing that was interesting is some people were saying, well, we're seeing cooling in the upper atmosphere. So that must be proof that climate change isn't real, right? Well, it turns out that the climate models were predicting that. So what's happening is there's different layers of the atmosphere, and one of the layers, and we won't go into the details because I don't remember them, but anyways, one of the layers, if there's less CO2 to trap the heat, the infrared radiation will heat that part of the atmosphere. And because there's more CO2, that part of the atmosphere is not getting warmed up as much as before. So the temperature of some parts of the atmosphere has gone down, but most of it has gone up. Okay. And so the models were actually predicting this, and it's kind of cool to see that they are. So the AMOC, so the Atlantic Meridional
Overturning current.
overturning current, which is a current that causes the Gulf Stream.
Yep.
And actually, that's the reason why much of Europe and the UK in particular are actually
Yeah,
hotter
palm
than
trees
here.
in southern Europe.
Yeah, they're actually hotter than here because of this. So what that current does is it brings warm water from the Gulf of Mexico up to Europe and heats Europe, right? That's slowing. It's slowed by somewhere around 20% at this point, okay? And actually, there's been movies that are based on this current stopping. It's stopped in the past. We know it has stopped in the past, so it could again. But if that happens, it will change climate considerably, especially in Europe. It's actually going to make some parts of Europe much colder, ironically, right? And other parts will be much warmer.
England.
Okay, and actually we have lots of data that proves the effect. There's lots of other stuff I haven't covered here. I think that's the last one. So is there any questions? Did I?
2 points. One of the tropical diseases you failed to mention is the vegetarian one. It's a tick-borne disease that makes you allergic to meat.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. My friend in Australia had it, and now she's like a vegetarian.
But it'd be great if everybody got that because then.
No, it'd be, well, I mean,
It'd be great for the planet.
I like barbecue. And then the other thing is that, no questions, I'm just sad now, says Adam. Yeah, that was a really downer presentation.
We've talked about solutions before, okay? We could talk about that again if you want to.
Quite honestly, I think it's crazy that we're not seriously researching high atmosphere sulfur dioxide injection more seriously.
The problem is that if we start geoengineering, we can never stop.
Yeah.
And if you
That's
stop, then
true.
there's a rubber band effect.
Yeah.
Because we're already economically on a path towards electrification, it makes more sense. So if we do some geoengineering in the meantime, while
It might
technology catches up.
incentivize people to actually make changes.
Yeah, so-
Well, it's got a Band-Aid.
So
Yeah, you have to be careful about that, but like, we're already at a point where the technology is becoming mature and
I
there
think
are many reasons other than climate.
But we suck at geoengineering, clearly.
yeah, so
Stop.
we have done geoengineering by emitting so much CO2.
Yeah.
right? A lot of people are saying that, well, the solution should be to do more geoengineering, whatever. There are other options that will allow us to reduce carbon or absorb carbon. There's a lot of research in that space. And I could, as
Yeah.
Mike knows, I could talk for hours about that, but there's a lot of different things that are being tried, being studied. Sulfur seems to be one of the ones that is less economically feasible.
It's important to make a point about the fact that it's not that we're putting too much CO2 in the atmosphere. That's really the issue. It's the speed that we're changing the climate, right? The Earth can balance out whatever CO2 we put in. It's just, it needs time to adapt. And
Yes,
we're
but
doing it way too fast for it to ever catch up and
It's
adapt.
not just the speed. So the speed is important for
Yeah.
species to adapt.
But even the climate needs to find an equilibrium. Like, we could have an
Yes.
equilibrium at the current CO2 level
Yeah.
that would be survivable for everyone. But It's the fact that-
That's not clear. That's one thing that's not clear.
well, geological time, it's been proven, right? Like these changes normally happen over geological ages, right? Where like there were palm trees on Baffin Island and stuff, right? But that's because it took 100,000 years to go from whatever CO2 it was to higher levels than we have today. The problem is that we're doing it in 100 years,
Yeah,
not
so
100,000.
part of the problem is we don't know what the effect will be.
Well, that too.
There's some things we don't know.
Yeah.
But we do know that it's causing an unstable climate.
Yes,
So
because
it's affecting our ability to produce food,
Yeah.
which is a real problem, right?
the Earth needs time to adapt.
So it needs time to adapt, but also it will adapt to in a situation that will be different. Just give you one example on that. If the temperature of the Earth went up by about 6 degrees Celsius, the Sahara would be green. Okay, it would change the climate so much that the Sahara would rain,
Oh.
it'll be green.
In any case, though, my point about geoengineering is not that we should jump into doing it now. We should be doing more smaller scale research of it, like do a bit of atmospheric injection, see what happens at a
So,
level that is relatively safe, right? Because there could be side effects.
so,
We need to
but
understand those things.
there is research happening on a bunch of things like that. There is active research happening, because a lot of people are thinking the same thing as you
I
are.
think we're going to, I think we're gonna get too desperate. 20 years from now, I think we're gonna have to pull it out. Looking at those graphs, I don't see any way around it.
There are other solutions that from what I've seen would be cheaper and better. One example is,
Jet fuel additive.
well, that's one possibility, but, so the reason we have less CO2 now than we had about, I'm guessing, tens of millions of years ago, is because of the Himalayas. Okay, so what happened is, as the Himalayas developed, the rock got weathered, and the rock has absorbed a lot of CO2, okay? So we could reproduce that with farms. So there's actually some stuff that's being used, and I can't remember all the details of that, but stuff that they spread for fertilizers. They could use different stuff that will absorb CO2, right? So there's a bunch of other solutions being looked at like that, right? But bottom line is, if you listen to the science, if you want to get back to the temperature that we have to not only stop emitting, we have to remove some stuff, right? Now, nature removes some stuff naturally, okay? So if we leave it, if it were to disappear in probably 200 years or so, we'd be back down to pre-industrial levels for CO2, because the earth would have balanced it out, okay? It would have been absorbed by the oceans and all that kind of stuff, right? But the problem is we keep on adding more, and we need to find a way to stop that and also take some out, right? So, but there's tons of research happening there. And there's, you can talk about it offline if you're interested in that. A lot of people are making pretty interesting science on that. Any other questions, comments?
You had mentioned the data, the vectors, disease vectors that are moving from the tropics up northwest, because they're popping up.
Mhm.
But also, a lot of, as the ice is melting, they're discovering a lot of diseases and viruses that have been dormant.
For a long time, yeah. There's a concern that some of those might be a problem. That's possible, but, it's a bit of it's a bit of a gamble, right? We don't really know.
And it's just found at least 30 that we haven't seen before, so.
Yeah, but they're not necessarily bad for us, right? So, right, there's a reason they're not here anymore. If they're not here anymore, they're not prevalent anymore, it's probably because they weren't adapted to humans or whatever, or, right? So, there's always a reason for everything. But, any other comments, questions? But that's good, really good question, yes. Anything else? No? Anything else online?
Mark was just concerned about telecommunication satellites, but I was assuring him that it's
Why?
fine.
Why?
Atmosphere things, it's fine.
No, it's not an issue, yeah, it's just no problem.
Uh,
CO2 doesn't absorb.
Tom says,
That's
thanks,
right.
Raymond. Great summary.
What's that?
Great summary. Thanks, Raymond.
Okay, you're welcome. So, I guess it's your turn.
All right, news for August. So Volkswagen finally announced Canadian pricing of the ID Buzz. It's a little on the high end, although this could also just be OEMs learning from having dealer markups happen on new vehicles, and the price may come down after a couple of years. So, yeah, but also, not buying one right away if it's too expensive for you is a good way to tell them, hey, that's too expensive, drop the price. So hopefully that'll happen. But yeah, I mean, for comparison's sake, this is, I think, $13,000 more than the base Kia EV9, which is also a 3-row, not van, but similar family vehicle.
Longer range.
With longer range, yeah. So the ID Buzz comes with a 91 kilowatt hour battery, but being like brick shaped, it's not super effective at using that 91 kilowatt hour battery. So it gets at best a rated range of 377. We're yet to see independent range tests though. Those are a lot more important for how much you can actually go on the highway. And some cars end up doing better than their rated range even on the highway. Some do worse. It all depends on the car manufacturer and their methods. There's going to be an all-wheel drive version for a bit more money, with a tiny bit less range, basically the same. So development from last month's news item, where Donald Trump vowed to end the quote EV mandate, which doesn't exist. He now is openly admitting that he was bribed by Elon Musk and he now must support EVs. All right, just gonna
Whatever.
whatever. It's just here for a laugh.
I mean, he's just openly corrupt.
Yeah. So this is news that came out today. When I wrote this, it wasn't official yet. Now apparently it's official. So Chinese EVs will now be tariffed at a rate of 100%, in addition to the existing 3% tariff, so 103%. And there's also going to be 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum coming from China. For just context, Canada imported $2.2 billion worth of Chinese EVs last year, probably mostly Teslas that are made in China. In any case, I mean, this is a kind of complex topic. On the one hand, like, you do want to protect domestic manufacturing, but this tariff's like really high, right? It's a de facto ban on Chinese EVs at a rate of 100%. And the other thing is there isn't currently a domestic EV industry to protect, right? Like, there's been some grants, there's some factories under construction and stuff, but like there's practically zero EVs being made in Canada at this moment. So what are they protecting, right? Anyway, they're kind of just doing this to go along with the US, which is doing it. So it's really just us kind of being an ally to them and trading partner. But it would be nice if they did some things to, really assure that they're a domestic manufacturing base to actually compete against, and not just sort of ban the competition. It's not really good for consumers.
It'll be interesting to see if China slaps some retaliatory.
Oh,
They are going to, yeah, they've done it before.
But it'll be on our beef and our grain and a bunch of other stuff that we
Yeah.
make.
Yeah, they will probably. So Hyundai is now above 10% of the US EV market share compared to Tesla, which is now under 50. So Tesla's market share is declining, Hyundai's growing. And the EV9 has already gotten to volume where it's outselling the ID4, the Aria, the BZ4X, the Niro EV, the Model S, not combined, just individually. And they're still haven't opened their Georgia EV plant yet, but it's supposed to open later this year. So Hyundai Kia is still on on the rise. Good to see.
And they have a bunch of models in the pipe still.
Yeah.
They do, yeah. So Ford has delayed its new EV plant, said they're canceling their electric 3-row, and they're also delaying the next gen F-150 Lightning. I think that one's a huge mistake considering the Silverado EV blows the Lightning out of the water in specs. The second gen Lightning was supposed to be something more similar to the Silverado EV, where it's going to be a dedicated EV platform, probably get something like a 200 kilowatt hour battery. Those are kind of my guesses, but would all make sense based on the hints that the CEO Tim Farley has given. But yeah, apparently, like, a lot of this is due to just pushback from the CFO at Ford. Like, the financial side of the house is not happy with the amount of spending and investment. The CEO is more enthusiastic about EVs, but has a lot of stakeholders to please. Other factor is they could be doing this to try and kind of get more government incentives to bring them back to the table. Also, they could be positioning themselves in sort of a neutral position given the election coming up. So things are always in flux, could change next year after the election's over. We'll have to see what happens with this. Nissan, some little hints dropping about an electric GTR. Not exactly. They basically just said, yeah, future GTR could be electric, and the current one is ending production this year, actually, the ICE one. I also put a picture of the Aria Nismo, just neat. They made that apparently, and they're going to be selling it. Probably, well, yeah, I don't think it has any performance gains. It just looks sportier, basically.
Is that the same size? It's just
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same size as the Aria.
It's got a red stripe.
And then the picture at the top is a sort of concept of what it's a Nissan's Hyperforce EV concept, which suggests what the Nissan GTR electric might look like.
Should just do the Miata. Oh, that's massive.
Some research papers dropped about LFP battery care, and Engineering Explained made a video about it. It's worth a watch.
So if you listen to Jeff Don and the presentation you did to EVS about a month ago, he's actually saying the opposite. So I'm wondering what's the real truth. Don in particular said that you should keep it within a narrow range as much as possible.
Well, actually, so, okay,
Is
I,
that
I don't want to get way too in the weeds on this. I would say the research he's referencing seems pretty reliable.
It's Jeffrey Don's research himself, and Don told us something different in his presentation.
So, okay, the problem with trying to keep an LFP battery in a narrow range is that LFP batteries have a very flat voltage curve. So it's very hard for them to assure that you actually know what the state of charge is. The problem with LFP batteries is to calibrate it, you have to charge it to 100%. So you have to do that on a regular basis, no matter what, just so that you're not running, your battery doesn't suddenly run out because it's miscalibrated. So yes, that's actually true. LFP batteries are, in terms of care for health, very similar to NMC batteries in that you want them to be around 50%. And if you can keep them in a narrow band around that point, that's kind of ideal. You can't realistically do that with LFP batteries though, because they would become miscalibrated. So the actual best care practice is really just, or what engineering explained, kind of recommended was just plug it in and charge it when you need to. Like, if it gets, down to like 50% or whatever, plug it in. The only thing he says to avoid is plugging it in every single day and charging it to 100% every single day if you only used a little bit of battery. If you used all the battery, then fine. Yeah, plug it, charge it to 100% every single day. It's not a big deal. LFP batteries can take usually about 3,000 charge cycles. So even if you did a full charge cycle every single day, it would last like 10 years.
Yeah.
So not to say like, oh, you're going to destroy it overnight. Okay, this is like flossing your teeth, right? If you don't floss your teeth for one day, your teeth don't fall out. That's exactly how you should think about battery care. It's like a health thing. You're just trying to like do some things to try to optimize the health of your battery. It's not like an emergency. It's not something you have to like stress about, right? If you were to plug in your LFP car and full charge it every 2 days, now it will run out of, it'll hit 3,000 cycles in 18 years. So, like, don't worry about it, but just try not to charge to 100% every single day if you don't need to. That's basically all you really need to
The
get.
3,000 cycle thing is to degrade down to 80%.
Yeah.
Right, so it's not even like it's done after 3,000. It's just
Exactly. It's not dead. It's just kind of down to a level that you'd consider like less usable.
which is 80% of a 500-kilometer car.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So I wouldn't say don't think about it at all.
120 kilometers.
I mean, most people want to take care of their cars to a reasonable level. At least I would hope so, right? You take your car when you had a gas car, you take it to get oil changes. You would do basic things to try and care for your car, right? No different with an electric car. It's good to know a bit about this stuff and try not to abuse your car. But don't stress about that either.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to find out if the manufacturers are going to be adding features to the cars to manage the batteries better so that people don't have to worry about it at all.
So yeah, one thing that would be nice is if you could say, let's say set a daily charge limit where on a daily basis it's charging to 80%, let's say like you would with an NMC battery, and then once a week it charges itself to 100% all by itself and you don't have to fiddle with it.
Yeah.
That would actually be really, really kind of ideal because then you're like, oh, every week you're calibrating it, but you're not charging it 100% every day, and you can plug it in every day and not ever be worried that you're not gonna have enough the next day, right? You're always gonna have at least 80% the next day. That's how I would do it.
Yeah, and it probably doesn't even need to,
probably do that.
You said something.
Yeah.
well, just saying even 80%, people start thinking, oh, well, I need to go on a trip, but I'm already short by 20%. But the point is that I don't even think it needs to be that low. It can be 95 is your daily thing, and then it hits 100% once a week.
There's kind of it's like a diminishing returns thing, right? So 95% is a lot better than 100. 90 is a little bit better than 95. 80 is better than 90. Technically, the best state of charge for your battery is 50%. Myself, I set mine to 75. That's where I draw the line of diminishing returns.
Yeah, but if you look at
honestly, it's so much range. I use like even on a bad day, like 20%. Like, who cares?
Yeah, so for Tesla, if you have an LFP battery and you set it to something less than 100, it tells you right there. We recommend that you set it to 100. So
Well, the actual wording in the Tesla vehicle is we recommend charging to 100% once a week. That's what it actually says, which is, yeah, pretty much what you should do. Just, make sure it's 100% every week.
So one of the things about having Sparky, the electric pickup truck, is that one of the things that I've recently learned is that my car was not actually battery balancing what I thought it was. And so part of that had to do with the voltage level that the charger was kicking off at, turning off at. And I discovered I actually had a cell that was severely undercharged. It was basically at, let's say, 75% when the rest of the pack was at close to 95%. So I had one cell off by 20%. Well, that limits the useful capacity of the battery by 20%, because as soon as one cell is out to lunch, you know, you're getting alarms and stuff that are going. And so it's really important that the cell balancing does happen on a regular basis. It doesn't have to happen on a daily basis, but it does have to happen on a regular basis to make sure the cells are all properly balanced at the top end.
Yeah, but your point, Alan, I think is well taken, that this is something you shouldn't have to know about.
Yeah.
And there should be a feature in the car that does it automatically, or, you know.
Or tells you to plug into 100%.
Yeah,
It's honey in the manual, like nobody reads the manual except me apparently, but in the forums, I'm just like RTFM for a lot of the questions, but one of the things they say in the manual is that once a month you should charge to 100% for.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I again want to
Yeah.
stress that this topic is for people who want to go the extra mile to really take care of their car. If you
Yeah.
don't follow any of these instructions, your car will be fine. It will outlast the warranty period by probably years. You know, like
But
it's
one
not
last-
like
The one
No,
last point I
you're
just
sorry,
want to make
but-
about this is that the vehicle to grid stuff is an opportunity for the manufacturers to actually help manage that, because then they can charge to 100% to do the battery balancing and immediately start sending energy back into the grid to bring it back down. So you're not holding it at 100% for long periods of time. You're just peaking there, doing the balancing, and then backing off right away, even if the car's not getting driven.
That would be ideal.
And it's likely that all of this will be irrelevant in 10 years with the next crop of batteries.
Yeah.
Anyway. Possibly, yeah, but.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, so into our Tesla news, recall to be aware of for Tesla owners. Apparently, there is a possible issue that can happen with the hood latch switch where it gets kind of bent or something, and the car doesn't detect that the hood is actually open. So it's not like they're just kind of popping open if they're actually closed, but you may not realize your hood is open and then it blows open while you're driving. But they're releasing a software update to fix it. I don't know how that works exactly. I guess they're just changing the threshold of this sensor.
That over the air update.
Well, I know
Yeah, but
how
physical
this works. I'm just
information
wondering like
would be-
physically how the like software update works, but apparently it does. So yeah, just for now, like make sure your hood's closed. New Model 3 trim launched in Mexico at a lower price point, hopefully coming to other markets, but we don't know yet. It's gonna have cloth seats, no heated or cooled seats. Yeah, the no heat, probably fine if you're in Mexico. No heated steering wheel, again, fine. No rear display. Actually, none of this is really that huge a deal, and a bit of lower price point, so that's nice. Report from Consumer Reports says Teslas have the lowest cost to maintain. And if you look at these figures, what's interesting to me about it is like they're not that much less than like the next ones down the list. So this tells you, like, in my opinion, I think there's still tons of room to optimize. Like, despite the fact that Tesla's quality control is not close to as good as Toyota's, there's still less to maintain than a Toyota. So imagine if Toyota was competent at making EVs, those things would cost nothing to maintain.
Yeah.
Right? So just signs for exciting. Something to
EV
do.
helmet.
It's not. No. So this is like overall for the brand. So it's comparing Teslas to, you know, gas Buicks and Toyotas and
Yeah,
Lincolns.
because Mazda doesn't have EV.
Yeah, not a significant one. All right, well, that's it for this month.
Any questions?
No, other questions, no?
Cool.
Time for the other.
The last graph, was that in dollars per year or dollars for the whole 5-year period?
Well, there's two columns there. One is 1 to 5 year, and then the other one is 5 to 10. The total is both, right?
Yeah, the question is that a yearly cost or
No, that's
a
total.
5-year?
Oh, okay. So that is,
If
you divide by 5 or whatever. Okay,
Total, it's like the
thanks.
total for basically 1 to 10 years. But the dark part is the first 5 years, and the light part is the subsequent 5 years.
Okay,
So the total is the total on the right. Okay, good, thanks.
it's not per year. Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so let's go through the events fairly fast. So we had only 1 kilowatts in coffee last month because we had plenty of other things keeping us busy. So we did the poker run on August 10th. We had about 10 cars. I think you could see them all there. Yeah, you see 10 there. Anyways, there's 11. We see one at the back that's not flowing properly. So anyways, went really well. Had fun. It was fun to do something that was just for fun this time around.
My cars have been fun.
Hey, what's that?
Nothing.
No, but normally we're doing something where we didn't have to talk to the public or anything. We were just talking to each other. Very interesting people, by the way. About half the people were from EVCO, I think. So, and for those who are interested, actually, are you going to be able to make it on the weekend?
I think so, pretty sure.
Okay. Okay. Well,
I'll send you an email to confirm and
perfect.
I'm still trying to get my wife to come on.
Okay. So what I'm referring to here is that the Hot Air Balloon Festival in Gatineau is on the weekend. And they've asked for people to bring some EVs, and I'm going there. And by going there, you get a credit on Secret Exit, I believe it is. And you also get 2 tickets for the whole, the day that you're there, okay? So you could be there for 2 days, the Saturday and or the Sunday, okay? So if you're interested, let me know. I think I sent that to a bunch of people already, but I'm not sure if I sent it to everybody. Okay, so next thing is we did something new this year. We went to Renfrew at Mackenzie Motors, and we did some test drives, and we actually probably spent more time actually looking at their vehicles and playing with them than anything else. We didn't do that many test drives. There were a few, but not very many. So we got to figure out how to make an event like that, be more productive.
So were EVCO members test driving with other members of the public? Is that what you're
Yes.
saying?
Yes.
We were
So-
driving their cars.
Yeah, so their
And
cars, yeah, they were not doing test drives. We were doing all the test drives with their cars and our cars.
I still can't tell the difference between a Blazer and an Equinox.
They're hard to tell the difference. They're hard to, inside you could,
No, inside they're the same too, so I don't get it.
yeah, they're very similar. They're not, the size isn't that much different. And I find the Equinox, which is supposed to be the smaller one, seems to be bigger in the back.
I don't understand.
But anyways, and it's less expensive, the Equinox too.
Yep.
Right, but if you're interested on learning more about these things, there's a Sonny Monroe
Sure.
he did an episode where he has one of his guys who used to work for GM on electric motors. And he has a lot of very interesting things to say about what GM has been doing. It turns out that they have some patents on some of the technology, and Tesla's using some of their patents. So from what I concluded from that, what they said is that the Ultium batteries and motors are really, really good. So so you shouldn't hesitate to buy one. Okay. Okay, Queenswood Heights. So this is last weekend. We had 2 events on Saturday. Here, that was in Orleans, the Music Festival and Family Fun Day. You see there we have 3. We had 4. Adam had to leave early, but here you see the bouncy castle at the back. It's powered by Carl's car. Okay, by the vehicle to load. And here, under the blue tent, there is a cotton candy machine that's being powered by Sam's car. Okay, so one of the things you want to do is you want to have a sign that says that so people know, because everybody that we pointed that out to, they were surprised that you could do that, right? So this is one way of really showing what we could do with these cars, right? And actually the guy who brought the bouncy castle, at the end of the day, he came to talk to me and he said, "You were able to power it for the whole day?" He said, "It must have taken lots of the battery, eh?" I said, "Well, maybe 2%." What, 2%? So it's a learning experience, and this is a really good opportunity for us to tout the benefits, right? So actually, this guy, he said, actually, oh, maybe I should consider an electric truck now.
Yeah, you
Right?
should.
So yeah, it would be. So,
Silverado.
yeah, but we were, so the, you see at the right, that's Mr. Sunday, they have a diesel generator, which we were hoping to replace with something else, but maybe next year, so.
That's pretty amazing. You're saying that 2%
Charge.
charge loss for the whole day of running a bus.
I think it's a bit more than that, but maybe five.
I mean, it's a 15 amp, right? So it was probably not using more than about 1,000 watts.
It's about 1,000.
And that's for like,
You can go 77 hours in the.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So for
It was using 900 watts.
Using like
900 watts? Okay.
Yeah, so you can go more than
Yeah.
3 days
Yeah.
for a full charge.
Yeah.
It's slapping.
So it's crazy, but having people see that I think is really helpful,
Like
right?
24/7.
Yeah.
How did it go, Raymond? I was, it seemed promising while I was there. I was disappointed I had to leave. Seemed like there was going to be lots of good foot traffic.
It wasn't super busy, but we did talk to a fair amount of people. But it was a bit like with Pride. With Pride, we weren't very aggressive in intercepting people on the street to get them to come and talk to us. But the people who did talk to us, like you, were the conversations were really good. And Henry, I think he sold half a dozen I-95s on Sunday. So his car was there on Sunday. We talked about his car a lot, obviously, right? And he showed it off a lot. So I think this was a good event. I was pleased with the event. For those who've never been to Pride, you have to go at least once. Okay, it's a really interesting event. You see all sorts of interesting stuff. So yeah. Upcoming events. So next meeting, September 30th. Kilowatts and coffee. Here the list is long and may be cut short because we are thinking that there may be, so September 21st, actually, there's a climate march happening, which I'll show on in the next slide. But also there's a possibility that we will partner with another organization for the carb fair. Okay, so we talked about doing the carb fair before, but the carb fair is a bit of a, it's an expensive venue and all that, right? So we'll see what we'll do. So first event that we'll have is September 4th. So we're going to the Tanglewood Community Center. We're going to do, no, we're not doing test drives. We're just static, static cars. I think we have already what we need.
Yeah, we have more than enough volunteers already.
Yeah.
We only give enough, they're giving us enough space for 4 cars in our tent. So, and we have more than 4 volunteers, so, we'll have to send out an email soon to the volunteers. I mean, we can have more than 4 of us come, they just may not be able to put their cars on display, but we can have them talk to people at least.
Yeah, but the point is, if you're interested in coming, you haven't
Yeah,
registered.
and the main event is actually, like, basically, we're going alongside the corn roast, which is the community corn roast that happens once a year.
Mhm.
So there will be people there, like just regular foot traffic. They're gonna give me the microphone at one point to announce our presence and tell people why we're there. So hopefully that'll direct some folks to come talk to us. We've been debating trying to do something with the vehicle to load, like serving some kind of food. Don't know if we're gonna make that happen or not. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Should be good because I think there's gonna be a lot of people there.
So the intent again is to show the vehicle to load and what you could do with it, right? So
Yeah.
we'll see what we could figure out. I wonder if there's a bouncy castle we could throw in,
Maybe a pop or pop.
or something else that they have.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe.
Maybe, right? So anyways, again, if you're interested in joining us, you're more than welcome, but we have enough volunteers at the moment. So we're doing another event at Marina Bay. This is a condo that Sam and I went to visit and to determine what they could do for EV charging. And so we don't need very many people. We have 2 cars right now. It's probably not cars. We could use another one if someone wants to volunteer. But aside from that, if we had a few more people to handle the bookings and all that, it would be useful. We're starting at 3 though. Okay, so they want to start early because they wanted to do this mostly when it's still light out. okay? And it's probably gonna be dark somewhere around 6 o'clock, so that's why we're starting at 3, but we'll have the booth and we'll have a bunch of cars.
That's near Bayshore.
Yes, yeah, Richmond Road, right west of Pinecrest. So. September 18th, so that's just a presentation in Morton, which is near Westport. If there's someone who wants to do the presentation, that would be great, because both Mike and I have a conflict, but I'll go if we don't have anybody else, but if someone's interested, that would be an opportunity. It's just a very short presentation. September 21st, like I said, so Fridays for Future, they're organizing a climate march on a Saturday, which makes it easy for people to participate. So if you're interested, this starts at 11 a.m. on September 21st. And we're looking to have as many people as possible to have a, have as much of an impact as possible, right? So you're welcome to join us. You don't have to register or anything. You just need to show up, okay?
I strategically put the Cars and Coffee close to those events.
Yeah, it's on that. So that was a very good idea. So next thing, like I mentioned, Carp Fair. We don't have details yet. We may have something there, but still talking to it's Cafes Community Association for the environment that is looking to have a booth there. And we would be there also. The reason they want to go there is to talk about the battery electric storage system, the BESS that they're wanting to deploy in the West End. And there's some local opposition, so the idea is to be there to talk about it and explain the reality of it to people, right? So next thing, the other thing, this is a Tuesday, I believe, October 1st. So this is with SCAN, Seniors for Climate Action Now. Yes, Mike, I'm part of that.
I said nothing.
You have to be 60. I just turned 60, so and a good friend of mine is part of this. So I joined, and I'll be there obviously on October 1st if you can.
I've got 20 years still. I'm good.
20 years. Yeah, right. Anyways, okay, so the other thing is October 5th, again, the showcase will not be at that location we're in the picture there, unfortunately. It'll be at Just Food Farms. And that's unfortunately where it's going to be. We do have a few people registered. We could probably use a few more. But we're going to scale it down compared to previous years. Here you see just a small portion of the cars we had, right? But this year, because of the location, we don't think we're going to attract that many people. Lansdowne was ideal for that. Last year we had about 3,500 people walk through our display, and did lots of test drives and talked to lots of people. But this Just Food Farm, it's a nice location, but it's out of the way. It's not a great location for what we're doing. Okay. So that's it. Again, membership. If you're not a member, you're more than welcome to become a new member. And then the next thing is so our YouTube channel. I didn't check how many subscribers we have now. We had 95 before. If you could subscribe, that would be great, because the more subscriptions we have, the more these things will tend to show up, right? And 95 is still pretty low. But of course, our monthly meetings are there, and there's a few other goodies there that you could look at. Okay, and I think that's it.
Second. So if you're watching us on YouTube, this is where your video ends. If you're watching us live in person, then stick around for the roundtable, and we'll see you next month. Oh, because you got to feed the beast.